Hello and welcome back to one more episode of Quantum Tutorials. In this episode, let us look at how to implement post processors as part of a Fabric app with an example. Here is a Fabric application with an integration service inside it, and this integration service connects to the Transact backend and it will retrieve the list of accounts or the list of holdings associated with the customer. We'll send the customer ID as an input parameter and we'll receive the list of holdings associated with the customer as an output. Let's see what is the response that we are receiving from this API. I configured the customer ID. When I click on save and fetch response, Fabric is talking to the backend system and it is retrieving the list of holdings associated with the customer ID that we have passed in the input parameter. Let us inspect the response that we have received. If you look at the response that we have received here, we have body as an array. Inside the body, there are various JSON objects. Each of these JSON objects represent a holding that is associated with the customer. If we inspect one of these JSON arrays, we will be able to find that it has the details such as product group ID, product name, available balance, account ID, available limit, available funds. All these details that are associated with one particular holding of a customer is present as part of this JSON object. So each JSON object inside this body array represents a holding that is associated with the customer. So this is the response that the Fabric has received from the backend system. Let us see how we can write a post processor for this integration service, which will further process this response that we have received. And in this post processor, we want to achieve grouping these JSON objects based on the category of the holding. For example, all the checkings type of holdings will be grouped into the checkings array. All the savings type of holdings will be grouped into the savings array. Like that, along with the body array which contains the entire list of holdings, we want to create sub arrays which will contain the holdings of a particular type. So we will be using this product name to identify what is the type of the holding. So based on this product name, we will group a specific type of holdings into a specific array. All the current accounts into one array, all the mortgage accounts into another array, all the savings accounts into another array, like that. So at the end of the post processor, along with the body array that we have inside the response, we will have multiple other arrays, each one representing a specific group of accounts. Let us see how to implement this post processor. And within Fabric, the Fabric provides a capability to implement your processors either using JavaScript or using Java. Let us look at the both ways of implementing these processors. Let us look at how to implement the post processor using JavaScript. Here is a simple JavaScript function that we have written. In this JavaScript function, we want to iterate over the response that we have received inside the fabric, essentially this response, and we want to process this body JSON array that we have and create multiple arrays, each representing a specific type of accounts. Let us see how to achieve that. So remember, this JavaScript function that we are creating here, we will link it to the integration service as a post processor, which means this JavaScript function would get executed within Fabric on the server. So inside this JavaScript function, we are using some of the implicit objects that are made available by Fabric to our custom code. Result is one such implicit object. So this result object is a representation of this entire response that Fabric has received from the backend system. So using the result object, you will be able to read each parameter that is present inside the result object, and then you will be able to read the values of each of these parameters. Inside the Fabric layer, there is a convention that is followed. For example, the leaf nodes, in this case the selected op status, if you look at it, so it's just a key value pair. So such type of elements inside the result are called as parameters. So these are called as parameters. And if you look at the body, it's a JSON array. So these type of elements inside the result object, they are called as data set. These are called as data sets within the Fabric response, the result object. Inside a data set, each JSON object that you are seeing is called a record. Okay? So each of these JSON object is one record, and a list of records will form a data set, and the result object can have multiple data sets, multiple parameters, multiple records inside it. So this is how the response or the result which is received inside the Fabric is interpreted by the Fabric layer. So with that understanding, let us look at how we are going through the result that we have inside this Fabric layer as part of our post processor, and how we are further processing that result. So from the result implicit object, we are reading the body data set by using this API find data set. So result object dot find data set is the API that we are using, and we are passing the ID of the body data set, and we'll read the entire value of that body data set. And if we see here further, from the body data set, we are getting the records available inside the body data set, and we are finding out the length of the records, which essentially gives us the length of this array, and we will start iterating over each record that is present inside the body data set. So how are we doing that? We have this API record, using which we are reading each record that is present inside the body data set at a time by using this body.getRecord and passing an index, while iterating over all the records that are present inside the body data set. We are reading each record that is present inside the body data set, and from that record, now we want to read the product name. the value of the parameter product name that is present inside each record of the body data set. For example, if you take this record, we want to read the value of this parameter. Remember, the leaf nodes, which are just a simple key value pairs, these are parameters, right? So like the op status one that we have described earlier, each of these leaf nodes are the parameters. So we want to read the value of this product name parameter present as part of this each record of the body data set. How are we doing that? If we look at this line of code, from the record which we have retrieved from the body data set, we are using this getParam API and passing the name of the parameter, and we are doing the get value on that parameter object. So this get value would give us the value associated with the product name parameter. So we are reading it into a local variable, and further we are verifying if the value of the product name parameter is saving account or current account or personal accounts appropriately. And what are we doing then? So we have created few array lists, each array list representing a group of certain type of accounts. An array list which holds all the savings accounts, an array list which holds all the current accounts, an array list which holds all the personal loan accounts, like that. So by using this API java.util.ArrayList, we are just defining these array lists. So these are empty at this stage of the post processor, and these array lists are being populated further once we identify the product name is of savings. That particular record which we are processing is being added into that array list. So with this logic, we are identifying each record, what is its type, and we are adding that into a new array list. So at the end of the iteration on the body data set, we will be having array lists populated with a specific type of accounts. The savings account array list would have all the savings accounts. The current accounts array list would have all the current accounts, like that. And once we have these array lists, so now along with the body data set, we want to create multiple data sets, each one representing a type of account, and we want to add that array list of accounts into each specific data set. Let us look at how we are achieving that. So we created the data sets representing each type of account like this. So by using this API data object dot dataset, so all these APIs, the result object and creating the data set and getting the record, reading the parameter and its value, so all these are available inside the fabric layer, and our JavaScript code is making use of the libraries that are present inside the fabric layer and the APIs within those libraries, and we are able to process the result object. So if we look at this part of the code, we are creating new data sets. We are giving the name of the data sets as savings accounts, current accounts, personal loan accounts, like that. So this is similar to the name of the data set body that we have inside the result object. So once we have created these empty data sets, once we have defined these empty data sets, we want to populate this data set with the array lists that we have created. So if we go further in the code, you'll be able to see the savings account data set. We are using the API set records and we are passing the array list object. So this is how you are populating the data set with specific set of list of accounts, and the data set is further added into the result object by using this set dataset API. So these APIs set records, set dataset, getting the value of the parameter which is there inside the result object. All these APIs are present inside the fabric layer and are made available to our post processors and pre-processors. So using those APIs, we are able to create the new data sets and add the array lists into the new data sets, and each of the data set is added into the result object. And this result object at the end of this JavaScript function would be the modified version of the result object, which will contain the processed result. So let's see how do we link this post processor to the integration service that we have inside that Fabric app. Just copy the entire code, the JavaScript function, and once we are at the operation level inside the integration service, expand the advanced tab, and in the custom code invocation tab, you will find the options pre-processor and post-processor, and you will be finding the options Java and JavaScript. So here we have written the post-processor using the JavaScript programming language. So select the JavaScript, expand the input window, and paste the JavaScript function which you have created. So this is like defining the post processor, and for invoking this post processor, we'll have to just invoke this function after defining it. Just copy the function name, and after defining the function, towards the end, we are just invoking that JavaScript function. So this is how we are defining a post processor using JavaScript programming language, and we have linked that post processor to a integration service operation. So let's see how this post processor will further process the result object. Let's click on the save and fetch response, and here is the new response that we have received. Let's copy this response and let's compare it with the result without post processing. So this is the result without post processing, and in this tab we have the result with post processing. If we inspect this result, so we have new data sets that are created. Personal loan accounts is one of the data set with all the personal loan accounts added into the data set. Current accounts with OD is one more data set that is created with the current accounts with OD type of accounts added into that data set, and the existing data that we have in the result object is intact. The mortgage accounts data set, savings accounts data set. So this is how new data sets are being added into the result object, and the existing data set and the data which is there in the result object, so those are intact. So this is how we will be able to create a post processor and attach it to a integration service operation, and it gets executed after the Fabric layer has received the response from the backend system and before the Fabric layer sends that result to the front-end application. A post processor is used for processing the response received by the Fabric from the backend layer, and update the response before sending it to the front end application, right? As you can see here, so this is the result without post processing, and this is the result with post processing. So where we have multiple new data sets that we have added. So here in this example, we are showing adding the data sets. Similarly, we can remove the existing elements from the result object. We can add records into the result object. We can add parameters into the result object. So all kinds of processing we can do within the post processor of the fabric layer.